growing. Thank you very much for inviting me to this very moving evening. My name indeed is Pieternella. I am a Dutch citizen. I am not Jewish, and I live in Israel with my Israeli husband since 1985. We have 4 children and 10 grandchildren, all living in this country. The story I will tell, and I've written it down, so I'm really telling it like a story, like a book. It's a personal one. It is based on family stories and memories, on my interpretation of these stories, and on research in various archives and databases. I will not be using the names of any of the people in the story, so please bear with me. My maternal grandmother was a fervent Catholic. She married a non-practicing Protestant with special papal permission, one of the conditions being that their children be raised as Catholics. They had 4 children, 3 of whom turned away from the Catholic Church the moment they left school. The family lived in a small town in the center of the Netherlands. My grandfather was a junior notary in a notary office that was owned by a Jewish family. When the war broke out, my uncle, the apple of his mother's eye, went into hiding in order not to be sent to Germany for forced labor. A law student, he was affiliated with the University Student Resistance. My mother was the youngest daughter. She finished school in June 1940 and lived at home. Her eldest sister also lived at home and helped care for their mother, who was frail and sickly. The second sister lived in another province with her husband, who was of German origin. He arrived in the Netherlands as a young refugee after the First World War. I do not know anything about his youth, but my mother told me that the rise of the Nazi Party in Germany made him take pride again in his German heritage. As an adult, he joined the NSB, the Dutch Nazi Party. Later, he joined the Wehrmacht and fought at Stalingrad in 1942. On the German side. My aunt and uncle had twins, a boy and a girl, in 1943, and another little boy in 1945. Another daughter was born a few years later. Thus, from the beginning of the war, my grandmother had a son in hiding from the Germans and a son-in-law affiliated with and fighting for the Germans. In 1940, my grandfather was arrested together with 2 colleagues, for the distribution of anti-Nazi pamphlets. All 3 were transferred to a work camp in Bochum, Germany, where my grandfather died of typhus in 1941. His colleagues were released and returned home. Also in 1941, my mother obtained a secretarial position in the same Jewish notary firm for which her father had worked. Anti-German measures were growing rapidly more stringent throughout the Netherlands. More and more people were trying to go into hiding. In 1942, my mother received a request from her boss to ask her mother whether she would give shelter to a Jewish couple she knew from the notary firm. This would be for a few days, while a more permanent hiding place could be found for them. My grandmother agreed, and my mother led the couple clandestinely to the family home. The couple hid in the attic, not for a few days, but for 8 months, as difficulties arose time and again in finding another hiding place. My mother recalled how she would refrain from asking friends over for fear of exposing their guests. The couple would go out for a breath of fresh air in the evening under cover of the blackout. One evening, in March 1943, they did not come back. A few days later, the Gestapo and the Dutch police came to the door. A local woman had betrayed them. There were many such people who took a few guilders for revealing the location of hidden Jews. It turned out later that this town had a particularly bad record for such denunciations. My aunt was taken to Kamp Vught, a concentration camp in the Netherlands, and was released after 6 months. The couple was transferred to Westerbork and subsequently to Sobibor, where they were murdered in April 1943. My frail widowed grandmother, whose own daughter and son-in-law were Nazi sympathizers, risked her family's safety and well-being in order to help others in need, because it was the right thing to do. I cannot imagine what she went through when it all fell apart. After the war, excuse me, after the war, those Dutch citizens who had been wrong, that is to say, had collaborated with the Germans, were imprisoned, often in the same camps that had served the Nazis. The anger directed at them was considerable, but it became clear that revenge was not a valid long-term policy. Measures were taken to help reintegrate the former offenders. Often they were relocated to less populated areas of the Netherlands, where they would have better opportunities to make a fresh start. My aunt and uncle were also arrested and interned, and their children were looked after by my grandmother, my eldest aunt, and my mother at my grandmother's house. There is a picture of the family at Christmas 1945, my grandmother with her grandchildren by her side. It's a happy picture. The parents are not in the picture. When my aunt and uncle were eventually permitted to return to their family, they moved to the northeast of the Netherlands, where my uncle became a teacher much later on in the local school system. Rehabilitation of the wrongdoers was a national objective, but it also became a critical mission for my grandmother. By taking in her grandchildren and looking after them, she took the first step towards reconciliation within the family because it was the right thing to do. Hopefully, her family would continue to work towards mutual acceptance and hopefully towards eventual forgiveness. My grandmother died in 1946. In the early 1960s, my uncle, the former resistance fighter, bought a farm in the south of France and transformed it into a holiday home to which he invited his extended family. But not his whole extended family. His sister and brother-in-law, who had been on the wrong side during the war, were not invited. My own family was living in the United States at the time, but I remember 2 holidays we spent at the farm, in 1967 and again in 69. The atmosphere was wonderful. Everyone was always busy and everyone had chores, cleaning, doing the washing, preparing food, men and women, by the way, not only the. We also swam in the pool, went out on trips, and took long walks in the mountains. But somewhere in the shadows, in the idyllic atmosphere of the farm, the old problem lurked. One branch of the family was kept away. For my uncle, the resistance fighter, and for my eldest aunt, the past refused to let go. Some things could not yet be forgiven, and for them, there was yet no peace to be made. As a teenager, I heard snippets of conversations at the farm and during family visits, and felt occasional waves of tension, which I could not place. No one talked with us children, even though it would be up to us and to future generations to help heal old wounds. My mother was the first to make peace, and over the years, my nuclear family's relationship with the family of the former collaborators became a strong and healthy one. My mother refused to let the past destroy her bonds with her sister and her brother-in-law and with their children. On October 7th, 2023, I'm sorry if I fall apart, I do it every time. My youngest son-in-law was shot and wounded by Hamas terrorists at the Nova Music Festival, and his best friend was murdered. The little family took some time out with my relatives in Europe. One of the people who opened her home and a heart to them was my cousin, the youngest daughter of the former collaborators. I think my grandmother would have liked that. It was so clearly the right thing to do. She would have been proud. Rehabilitation is not an easy task. It is arduous and it takes a very long time. As my family story shows, it may take generations and it may never be complete. One of the problems is silence. As in the rest of Europe, there was a sort of culture of silence in the Netherlands about the betrayal of the Jews, about the extensive, active, and tacit collaboration with the Germans, about the collective trauma of occupation. The idea was to move forward and try to let the wounds heal. My mother left the Netherlands in 1946. She was not there when my grandmother died, and her siblings blamed her for that. But she felt she needed a fresh start and took a secretarial job in Jakarta, Indonesia, where she met my father and where my sister and I were born. The past for my mother always stayed in the past. I do not remember when I first heard the story of the Jewish couple in my grandmother's house. The knowledge that there was a story had lain dormant in my mind for a very long time. But since coming to Israel, I became more and more aware of it. The yearly Holocaust commemorations in Israel, with so many stories surfacing each year, made me want to know what happened in my own family. But my mother, my immediate source, had never been very forthcoming. She insisted on the very few occasions I asked through the years that the couple died and there was no sense in trying to find out more. She thought there may have been children in the family, but why dig up the past? Why reopen old wounds? In 2005, my son planned to join his 12th grade class's visit to Holocaust sites in Poland, a national program that is one of the pillars of the Israeli education system. This triggered something in me, and this time I finally took action. Through various sources, including Yad Vashem, I discovered that the couple indeed had a daughter and that she was living in Israel. I made contact with her, visited her home several times, and stayed in touch via email until the early 2020s. I brought my mother and my sister to visit, and of course my own children. I remember a warm-hearted and sharp-minded lady who, for all the sorrow and loss she experienced as a child, was not bitter. She told me the story of her hiding during the war. It turns out that her first hiding place was with a family in the very same town who lived just a few blocks from my grandmother's house. I knew that she wanted to fill in missing pieces in the puzzle of her childhood. She was so young when she parted from her parents. But unfortunately, my mother could not supply much information since she was home very little and only went up to the attic to bring food and other necessities. I know she spoke with the couple, but my mother remembered nothing beyond small talk. I wished she had more to tell, but I understood that as a young person in her early 20s in the grim atmosphere of occupation, she tried to have as much of a good time with her friends as she could. The daughter was able to tell my mother something she did not know, that she came to visit my grandmother after the war with another family member to thank her for giving refuge to her parents and to find out whether they had left anything behind. My grandmother explained to her that her father had asked, should he and his wife not return home, that all their belongings be destroyed, including all papers and including what looked to my grandmother like a diary that he had been keeping. He did not want the host family to suffer any adverse consequences from their attempt to give refuge. My grandmother complied, not to save her own skin, but because, again, it was the right thing to do. She honored the wishes of the people she had tried to protect. So sadly, nothing was left to be given to the daughter. How I would have wished for a happier ending, and how I wish I had started looking earlier. Perhaps that is the reason I've only very rarely told this story. But I am thankful for having met the daughter of the people my grandmother tried to help. That is an honor and a privilege. My own children and grandchildren now feel they are part of the story. I am proud of my grandmother and her courage. Physically, she was frail, but I see her as a strong and stubborn individual who fought for what she thought was right. Her legacy to me, I think, is to keep this story alive, and I will attempt to do so from this day forward. Thank you very much, and sorry for the tears.